Have you ever walked into two different companies and just felt a completely different vibe? Like one place is buzzing with collaborative energy, while another feels quiet, formal, and really structured. Well, that's no accident. Every single organization has its own unique personality, a kind of DNA that shapes how everyone inside it thinks, acts, and works together. But what is that DNA really? And can you actually design it for success? Let's break it down. So, what is this workplace personality? It's this powerful, invisible force that leaders and academics have been trying to pin down for decades. And for good reason. Getting it right can honestly be the difference between a company that thrives and one that really struggles. Before we dive in any deeper, just take a second. Think about your own workplace. How would you describe its personality? Is it, competitive, nurturing, innovative, maybe even a little chaotic? That feeling you're trying to put your finger on, that's exactly what we're talking about today. Now, the formal term for this is organizational culture. You can think of it as the unwritten rules of the road, right? It's the shared understanding of what's important, and it's the collective identity that makes one organization so different from another. It's that secret sauce that dictates how people behave when the boss isn't even looking. And a 2023 study by Fernandes and his team put it in the simplest, most powerful way I've ever heard. Organizational culture is just how things are done here. That's it. It guides everything from the biggest strategic decisions all the way down to the smallest everyday interactions. So if culture is just how things are done, what kind of doing should a company be encouraging? Because let's be real, the best companies don't just have people who do the bare minimum. They have employees who voluntarily go that extra mile. And there's a name for this: organizational citizenship behavior, or OCB for short. Think of it as all the helpful, constructive things people do that aren't technically in their job description. Like helping a coworker who's totally swamped, speaking positively about the company, or volunteering for a committee. This is the stuff that makes a workplace truly great. The Fernandes study breaks this down into 5 key behaviors. First, there's altruism. That's when you voluntarily help a teammate who's drowning in a deadline. Then you have conscientiousness. This is about staying late to make sure your project is absolutely perfect, not just good enough. Sportsmanship means, not complaining when the printer jams for the 10th time today. Courtesy is as simple as giving a colleague a heads up about a change that might affect their work. And finally, civic virtue. That's things like joining the party planning committee or just actively participating in company town halls. Okay, so we know what good behavior looks like, but how in the world do you create an environment that actually encourages it? To figure that out, the researchers used a classic model that sorts pretty much every organization into one of 4 distinct culture types. First up is the clan culture, which feels like a big family. Think of a small, tight-knit company where everyone's got each other's back. Next is adhocracy. This is your classic tech startup, all about innovation and taking risks. Then you've got the market culture. This is a super results-obsessed environment, like a really competitive sales floor. And last, there's the hierarchy culture, which is all about control and process. Think of a government agency or a huge traditional bank. All right, now for the fun part. Let's connect the dots. The researchers wanted to answer one crucial question. Does the type of culture a company has directly predict whether its employees will be those good corporate citizens we're talking about? This diagram here shows their exact game plan. Essentially, they went out and surveyed hundreds of employees to see if there was a direct statistical link between a company's culture type and those 5 positive behaviors we just went over. And the answer? A resounding yes. The type of culture an organization fosters doesn't just create a vibe, it measurably and significantly predicts how its employees are going to behave, especially when it comes to those voluntary, good citizen actions. But here's the real kicker. Not all cultures are created equal. The study found that 2 types were far and away the best at promoting these positive behaviors: the collaborative, supportive clan cultures and the innovative, risk-taking adhocracy cultures. They were the clear winners. And check out this tree map. It shows the results in such a powerful way. Each big colored section represents one of those positive behaviors. Now look inside one of them. Let's take civic virtue in the top middle. See how the green adhocracy and red clan boxes are just huge, but the market and hierarchy boxes, they're tiny. And that pattern repeats pretty much across the board. The collaborative and innovative cultures just have a much, much stronger impact. So the solution seems simple then, right? Just build a clan or an adhocracy culture. But how do you even do that? The logical first step would be to measure your current culture to see where you stand. And this, unfortunately, is where our nice, clear picture gets a whole lot fuzzier. Because think about it. To change your culture, you first have to measure it accurately. You have to know where you are to figure out where you're going. And it turns out, trying to measure something as complex as a human system like culture, well, it's incredibly difficult. A totally separate 2023 review by Richter and her colleagues looked at 50 years of attempts to measure concepts just like this one. And what did they find? Decades of confusion. They discovered that what academics say they're measuring with a term like culture often doesn't actually line up with the questions they ask in their surveys. So why is it so messy? Well, the Richter study points to a few key problems. Researchers use all sorts of different labels for the exact same idea. The lines between concepts get really blurry, and different ideas often overlap and get contaminated, which makes it almost impossible for researchers to compare the results. It's kind of like everyone is trying to measure a room, but they're all using different-sized rulers. So where does that leave us? On the one hand, we have some really clear evidence that certain cultures drive great behavior. But on the other hand, we have evidence that our tools for measuring that very same culture are kind of flawed. So what are we supposed to do with that? And this brings us to what I think is the most important takeaway from all of this. Maybe we've been a little too focused on perfectly measuring culture, when the real goal is to just be intentional about building it day in and day out. So here's how we can square that circle. The evidence on the left is crystal clear. Cultures built on support and innovation create the best behaviors, period. So what that means for you, on the right, is to just focus on those principles. You don't need a perfect score on some survey to know if you're actively building a workplace based on trust, teamwork, and creativity. The tools might be fuzzy, but the goal is perfectly clear. Which really just leaves us with one final question to think about. And this isn't just for leaders, this is for everybody. The data is clear on what works. So the only question left is, with your actions, every single day, what kind of workplace are you choosing to build?